On a freezing winter night, a ruthless billionaire meets a little girl selling a torn doll in the snow. He almost walks away until he recognizes the doll. Hours later, a child's heart is failing, a courtroom is waiting, and a promise he never knew he made must finally be kept. Snow fell sideways over Manhattan, sharp as broken glass. Rowan Kincaid stepped out of the restaurant into the winter night, the warmth dying behind him as the door closed with a muted click. Inside, crystal glasses and polite applause had celebrated nothing. Outside, the city stripped him bare. At 43, Rowan had everything the world counted as success. A private driver idled at the curb. His phone buzzed with messages from partners in London and Tokyo. Kincaid Capital had closed another ruthless quarter. And yet his chest felt hollow. 6 months had passed since Ivy's death. 6 months of penthouse silence. 6 months of waking up alone, staring at a ceiling she would never see again. The doctors had called it an aggressive autoimmune disorder. Rowan had called it punishment. He pulled his cashmere coat tighter and waved the driver away. "I'll walk." Snow crunched beneath his shoes as he headed north, lights blurring through icy windshields and neon signs. The cold felt earned, deserved. Each step through the storm matched the ache inside him. 3 blocks from his building, between 2 renovated brownstones, the wind funneled into a narrow alley. Trash bins rattled. Snow collected in dirty drifts. That was when the voice reached him. Thin, trembling, impossible to ignore. "Mr. Please." Rowan stopped. He turned, irritation rising until he saw her. A small girl stood beneath a rusted fire escape, Snow, clinging to her dark knit hat and soaked hoodie. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her hands shook, not just from cold, but from urgency. She held something out toward him. "Please, sir," she said again. "Would you buy my doll?" Rowan opened his mouth to refuse. Then he saw the doll, and the world tilted. The doll was handmade. Not factory soft, not perfect. Cloth skin, faded dress. Yarn hair tangled from weather and time. Button eyes, one blue, one green. Rowan's breath caught so sharply it burned. He knew that doll. Not this one, but that one. 20 years ago, when he and Ivy were still poor enough to count quarters for coffee, he had given her a doll just like this. A silly, uneven thing she'd laughed over, then cherished like treasure. She had named it Lucy. "I'm not interested," Rowan said automatically, the words coming too late. "Please," the girl whispered, stepping closer. Snow soaked through her shoes. "My little brother is sick. I need money for milk. Or medicine." Her voice didn't beg. It stood its ground. Rowan looked down at her face. Hazel eyes. Too serious? Too awake for a child? "Did you make this?" he asked, his voice rough. She shook her head. "My mom did. She made lots of dolls. But this one was special." Rowan took the doll before he realized he was reaching. The stitching along the left arm was uneven, exactly like Ivy's. His fingers tightened. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elsie," she said. "Elsie Hart." The last name landed like a soft punch. "And your brother Noah? He's 6. He's really sick." Snow fell harder, filling the alley with white noise. Rowan swallowed. "Where is he?" Elsie hesitated, then turned. "This way." She led him deeper into the alley where the city's glow died and the cold grew teeth. Rowan followed. Against every instinct that had made him rich. Against every rule that had kept him safe. Because the doll in his hands suddenly weighed more than gold. They were hidden behind a stack of abandoned produce crates. Flattened cardboard. A single thin blanket. Snow creeping in from every side. Noah lay curled like a broken bird. His breathing was wrong, too fast, too shallow. His lips were pale. His cheeks burned red with fever. Rowan dropped to his knees. The cold bit through his trousers, but he barely felt it. "He's been coughing for days," Elsie said quietly. "He won't eat." Rowan placed a hand on the boy's forehead. Fire. Panic snapped clean through him. "We need to get him to a hospital," Rowan said, already pulling out his phone. Elsie's shoulders tensed. We can't pay. I can. She studied him, searching for the lie. Rowan didn't look away. As he dialed, Elsie clutched the doll tighter and whispered to it, lips moving fast. What did you say? Rowan asked. She flushed. I told Lucy that she found the prince. Rowan froze. Prince, my mom used to tell us stories, Elsie said, about a prince who was lost. She said someday he'd find us. Rowan's throat closed. She said he'd know us. Elsie continued softly, because of Lucy. Snow swirled around them like a held breath. Rowan ended the call as headlights turned into the alley. What was your mom's name? He asked, though his heart already knew. Elsie met his eyes. Ivy Hart. The world cracked. Rowan lifted Noah into his arms, shockingly light, and stood as the car door opened. For the first time since Ivy died, something pierced the numbness. Not grief, purpose. And the night, cold and merciless, began to change everything. The car cut through Manhattan like a blade through ice. Snow slammed against the windshield, blurring streetlights into long, trembling streaks. Inside the back seat, Noah lay across Rowan's arms, his small body burning through layers of wool and doubt. Stay with me, buddy, Rowan murmured, though he had no idea if the boy could hear him. Elsie sat rigid beside them, knees tucked tight, Lucy pressed to her chest, as if the doll were armor. Her eyes never left her brother's face. You should buckle him, Rowan said gently. She shook her head. He breathes better like this. Rowan didn't argue. The driver glanced back, confusion flickering across his face. Mount Sinai, he asked. Yes. Emergency entrance, now. The word emergency echoed. Noah coughed, a wet, tearing sound that made Rowan's stomach drop. His chest hitched, then stilled for half a second too long. Rowan leaned forward, instinctively shielding the boy from a danger he couldn't name. How long has he been like this? He asked. Elsie swallowed. Since before the snow started. That was days ago. I know. The city rushed past, indifferent. Pedestrians huddled under umbrellas, unaware that a life was unraveling 3 lanes over. Where have you been staying? Rowan asked. Elsie hesitated. Bus stations, sometimes hallways. We try not to sleep where people yell. Her voice was flat. Practiced. Rowan's jaw tightened. At a red light, Noah stirred, eyes fluttering open. Els, he whispered. I'm here, she said instantly, stroking his hair. Don't sleep too deep. Noah's gaze drifted to Rowan, confused, trusting. Is he? The boy breathed. Rowan met his eyes. I'm getting you help. Noah nodded, satisfied, as if that promise alone was medicine. The car lurched forward again, sirens howling somewhere distant. Rowan stared out into the storm. 6 months ago, he had buried his wife. Tonight, he feared burying something else. The emergency room glowed like a harsh sunrise. White lights, beeping monitors. The smell of antiseptic slicing through winter air as sliding doors opened wide. Pediatric emergency, Rowan shouted, already moving. Nurses converged instantly. What's his age? 6. Symptoms: fever, labored breathing, days of coughing. They took Noah from Rowan's arms, the sudden emptiness almost knocking him off balance. Elsie lunged forward. Noah, he's right here, a nurse assured, guiding her gently. You can see him soon. Rowan followed until a hand stopped him. Sir? He turned. A woman in her mid-30s stood there, clipboard tucked against her chest. Sharp eyes, calm voice. No nonsense. I'm Tessa Marlowe, Child Protective Services. The words landed like handcuffs. These children came in without a legal guardian, she continued. I need to ask how they came to be with you. Rowan exhaled slowly. I found them in an alley. The boy was sick, and instead of calling authorities, I brought him here. Tessa wrote something down. Her pen didn't pause. A doctor approached, silver streaks in her hair, fatigue etched deep. I'm Dr. Priya Desai. We're stabilizing him now. How bad? Rowan asked. Dr. Desai hesitated. Pneumonia. But there's more. Tessa's eyes sharpened. He has a congenital heart defect. Dr. Desai continued. Ventricular septal defect. Untreated. Rowan's pulse roared in his ears. Can you fix it? He asked. Yes, but not tonight. And not without complications. I'll pay, Rowan said immediately. Whatever it takes. Tessa's gaze flicked to him. Money doesn't establish custody, Mr. Kincaid. Rowan Kincaid. Recognition sparked but didn't soften her. These children are wards of the state as of tonight. Across the room, Elsie sat alone, Lucy clutched tight, watching everything with terrifying awareness. Rowan met her eyes, and for the first time he felt truly powerless. Noah slept under a web of tubes and wires. The machines hummed like distant insects, keeping time with his fragile breaths. Elsie stood beside the bed, one hand on the rail, the other gripping Lucy's dress. Rowan crouched beside her. He's strong, he said. Elsie nodded. He has to be. Tessa observed them from the doorway, unreadable. Elsie, Rowan said softly. Can you tell me about your mom? The girl's shoulders squared. She made dolls. She sang when she cooked. She said stories were maps. Rowan swallowed. What was her name? Elsie didn't hesitate. Ivy Hart. The room went silent. Rowan felt the floor tilt beneath him. Hart. Ivy Hart. His wife's maiden name. The doll in Elsie's arms suddenly felt like a loaded weapon. How old are you? Rowan asked, voice barely steady. 10. Noah just turned 6. The math slammed into place. 9 months, years apart. A reconciliation filled with secrets he hadn't known to ask. Tessa stepped forward slowly. Mr. Kincaid, is there something you're not telling me? Rowan stared at the sleeping boy, at the girl who looked like Ivy's ghost wrapped in courage. I think he said carefully, these might be my children. Tessa didn't react. Not yet. DNA testing will tell us that, she replied evenly. Until then, protocol applies. Elsie looked between them. Is he going to take Noah away? Rowan's heart cracked. No, he said instantly. I won't let anyone take him from you. Tessa raised an eyebrow. You don't have that authority. Rowan stood. Then I'll earn it. Elsie studied his face, searching, measuring. Finally, she whispered. Mom said the prince wouldn't know he was the prince. Rowan closed his eyes. Outside, snow pressed against the windows, and the war for blood, for truth, for 2 small lives had officially begun. The hospital clock didn't tick. It hunted. Each second slid forward like a blade across Rowan Kincaid's nerves as he stood outside the pediatric ward, staring through glass at the boy who might be his son. Noah slept under pale lights, chest rising unevenly, wires tracing his small body like a map of fragility. Elsie sat beside the bed, perfectly still, as if movement itself might break him. Tessa Marlowe joined Rowan in the hallway. If you're suggesting paternity, she said quietly, we need DNA confirmation. Immediately. Rowan nodded. Do it. Expedited testing takes 48 hours. Then start the clock. Tessa studied him. You understand what this means? If the test is positive, every decision you've made every year you didn't know will be questioned. Rowan didn't blink. I'm done being protected from the truth. Inside the room, Elsie looked up as Rowan entered. They're going to take our blood, she said calmly. Like on TV. Yes, Rowan said, but it's to help Noah. She nodded once. Okay. A nurse approached, gently explaining the swab. Noah stirred, confused, frightened. Els, he whispered. I'm here, she said, pressing Lucy against his shoulder. It won't hurt. Rowan watched as the samples were taken, his own cheek scraped, Noah's swabbed, Elsie's collected with solemn consent. The moment felt ceremonial. Dangerous. When it was done, Rowan stepped back into the hallway and pulled out his phone. He hadn't called her in years. Marin, he said when the line connected. It's Rowan. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. You don't get to use my name like that. I need the truth, he said. About Ivy. About the children. Another pause. He could hear the weight of years shifting. She tried to tell you, Marin said finally. God, Rowan, she tried. The words struck hard. She called, she wrote. You were always flying, always closing something bigger than your own life. Rowan leaned against the wall as if struck. And when you came back, he asked. She was already pregnant, Marin said. And when you sent the divorce papers, she decided she'd do it alone. Rowan closed his eyes. I didn't know, he whispered. I know, Marin replied. That's the worst part. The call ended, leaving Rowan staring at the floor. 2 days, 48 hours, until the truth would stop hovering and land. Night swallowed the hospital in blue shadows. Snow pressed against the windows, soft but relentless, as Rowan sat alone beside Noah's bed. Elsie slept, curled in a chair, Lucy locked in her arms like a key. The machines hummed, steady, unforgiving. Rowan's eyes kept drifting to the doll. Something about it wouldn't let him rest. Carefully, he eased Lucy from Elsie's grip and examined the stitching under the dim bedside lamp. The seam along the back wasn't accidental. It had been opened, closed, opened again. A hidden pocket. His breath caught. Rowan slid 2 fingers into the stuffing and felt paper. His hands trembled as he unfolded a small, pale blue note, the edges softened by time. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Rowan. Just his name nearly broke him. If you're reading this, Lucy has found her way to you. That means you finally looked closely. Tears blurred the words. I'm sorry I kept them from you. At first it was pride, then fear, then time hardened into silence. Our children are extraordinary. Elsie has your mind and my stubborn heart. Noah has your smile and my love of stories. Rowan covered his mouth, a sound tearing free despite his control. They deserve a father who stays. I believe you can be that man. The letter shook in his hands. She had known. She had planned for this moment. Rowan refolded the note and pressed it to his chest like a wound. Behind him, a small voice spoke. You found it. Rowan turned. Elsie stood there, eyes open, too aware. Mom said it was for you, she continued. She said Lucy would know when. Rowan knelt in front of her, tears unhidden. She believed in me, he said. Elsie nodded. She always did. The doll returned to her arms, lighter now. Purpose fulfilled. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the past and future collided, and the clock kept hunting. The results arrived at dawn. Tessa Marlowe stood in the quiet conference room, a single folder on the table between them. Rowan hadn't slept. Neither had Elsie, who waited outside with Noah. Are you ready? Tessa asked. Rowan nodded once. She slid the paper forward. Probability of paternity 99.998%. The room tilted. Rowan stared at the words until they burned into him. I'm their father, he said, not as a question, but as a reckoning. Yes, Tessa replied. Biologically, he closed his eyes. Years lost. Moments never lived. A childhood he'd missed without knowing. What happens now? He asked. Now, Tessa said carefully, we begin evaluations, home studies, court oversight, and Noah. Tessa exhaled. That's where it gets complicated. Dr. Desai entered, her face tight. His pneumonia is responding, but the heart defect is stressing him. He'll need specialized care soon. Rowan stood. Do whatever it takes. Dr. Desai shook her head. Without legal guardianship, you can't consent to advanced treatment. The words hit harder than the diagnosis. Elsie appeared in the doorway holding Noah's hand. Is he our dad? Noah asked softly. Rowan dropped to his knees in front of them. Yes, he said. If you'll let me be. Noah smiled weakly. Okay. Elsie studied him longer. If you're our dad, she said, you don't get to leave. Rowan met her gaze. I won't. Outside, winter tightened its grip. Inside, the battle shifted, from truth to law. The word father settled into the room like fresh snow. Soft, heavy, impossible to ignore. Rowan knelt in front of the hospital bed eye level with two children who watched him as if the future itself were waiting to hear his answer. Noah's fingers trembled in his sister's grip. Elsie's chin lifted, braced protective. Yes, Rowan said again, slower now. I'm your dad. Noah's face cracked into a small, tired smile. For real, Rowan said. The doctors did special tests. Noah exhaled, relieved, then leaned weakly into Elsie's side. Okay, then you have to stay. Rowan nodded. I will. Elsie didn't smile. If you're our dad, she said carefully. Where were you before the question didn't accuse? It measured. Rowan didn't look away. I didn't know about you. That's the truth. And it's not good enough, but it's the only honest one I have. Silence stretched. Did you love our mom? Elsie asked. Rowan's throat tightened, more than I knew how to show. Elsie studied his face like a judge reading a verdict. Noah watched her, waiting for permission to believe. I don't need you to be perfect, Elsie said finally. I need you to not disappear. Rowan reached out, stopping short of touching her. I promise. I won't ever leave you. Not when things get hard. Not when you're angry. Not even if you don't want to talk to me. Noah smiled wider. Even if I'm bad, especially then. Noah nodded, satisfied. Elsie didn't nod. She stepped closer. You have to promise again, she said, because promises break. Rowan swallowed. I promise again. She watched him a long moment, then placed Lucy between them like a seal. Okay, Elsie said. Then you can try. It wasn't forgiveness. It was permission. Tessa Marlowe stood in the doorway, witnessing everything. This doesn't change the legal process, she said gently. But it matters. Rowan stood taller now, not richer, not stronger, but anchored. Outside, winter pressed against the glass. Inside, a family began forming carefully, painfully, honestly, and none of them knew how soon that promise would be tested. The hospital slept. Rowan didn't. He dozed in a chair beside Noah's bed neck, stiff mind, half awake, listening to machines breathe for his son. When he startled awake, something was wrong. The chair beside the bed was empty. Elsie, he whispered. No answer. Lucy was gone. Rowan stood so fast the chair scraped loudly across the floor. Noah stirred. Where's Elle's? Panic flooded Rowan's veins. She's here. He stopped himself. He wouldn't lie. Security was called. Tessa appeared within minutes, already issuing commands. Camera check, stairwells, emergency exits. Rowan's hands shook as footage rolled. There, Elsie, slipping from the room coat on Lucy, clutched tight. Alone, into the night. She left a note, Noah whispered, suddenly pointing to his tray. Rowan grabbed it. Lucy is breaking. I have to fix her. The words were neat, determined. She didn't run from you, Tessa said quietly. She ran towards something she's afraid of losing. Rowan grabbed his coat. I'm finding her. Snow greeted him like an enemy. The city was quieter at dawn, streets glazed white breath fogging the air. Rowan searched where Elsie had spoken of before. The park, the zoo, the places her mother promised. Finally, near a frozen fountain, he saw her. Elsie sat hunched on a bench needle, trembling in her fingers, Lucy laid open like a wound. Elsie, Rowan said softly. She looked up, eyes red but steady. She's coming apart. Rowan sat beside her, ignoring the cold soaking through his coat. So were you, he said gently. And you didn't leave. She sniffed. Lucy is all I have left of Mom. Rowan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small sewing kit. I thought that might be why you left. Elsie stared at it. You'll help, I'll learn. Snow fell around them as Rowan threaded the needle with clumsy care. Together they stitched. Not perfectly, but together. The thread knotted twice before Rowan got it right. Elsie watched his hands closely correcting him when needed, her small fingers guiding his larger ones. Lucy lay between them, opened but not afraid. She needs to stay the same, Elsie said. Just stronger. Rowan nodded. That's what fixing really is. The seam closed slowly, carefully, with patience neither of them knew they had. When it was done, Elsie hugged Lucy tight. She's okay, she whispered. Rowan exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath the entire time. As they walked back through the snow, Elsie slipped her hand into his. It was brief, but it stayed. Back at the hospital, Noah burst into tears when he saw her. You always say goodbye, he sobbed. I did, Elsie said softly. You were sleeping. Rowan knelt beside them. Next time we go together. She nodded. Later, as Noah slept, Elsie sat beside Rowan. You were scared, she said. Yes, Rowan admitted. That means you care, she replied, echoing her mother's wisdom. Rowan smiled sadly. Your mom was very wise. Elsie looked at Lucy, newly stitched. She said love finds its way home. Outside, the snow began to thin. Inside, something stronger than fear took root. Not certainty, commitment. And winter, cold, merciless winter had done its work. It had stripped them down and left something real. Rowan's penthouse had never felt small. That night it did. Snow dusted the glass walls, Central Park spread below like a frozen ocean. The apartment was immaculate, white marble, steel lines, silence polished to a shine. It was a place designed for admiration, not living. This is a castle, Noah whispered, eyes wide, breath still shallow but excited. He took 3 careful steps into the living room, marveling at the echo of his own voice. Els, look, everything's shiny. Elsie didn't step inside. She stood just past the threshold, Lucy tight to her chest, eyes sweeping corners, exits, shadows. She catalogued the room the way soldiers check a battlefield. It's very clean, she said finally. Rowan tried to smile. Too clean, she nodded. Mom said houses need mess. Otherwise they're lonely. The truth of it landed harder than any accusation. Rowan watched as Noah climbed onto the couch, sinking into cushions that had never known children's weight. He laughed, a bright, startled sound, and Rowan felt something shift in his chest. He hadn't heard laughter in this apartment since Ivy died. A housekeeper hovered uncertainly near the kitchen. Rowan waved her away gently. Not tonight. He knelt to Noah's level. We'll make this place messier, together. Noah grinned. Can we? Elsie finally stepped inside. She moved slowly, touching nothing at first. When she reached the guest room, now prepared with a small bed, blue blankets, books stacked neatly, she paused. This is for us, she asked. Yes, Rowan said. But we can change it. However you want. Elsie nodded, not trusting the words yet. That night, Rowan slept on the floor outside their room. He told himself it was to listen for Noah's breathing. He didn't tell himself it was because he couldn't stand the thought of being behind a closed door. At 2:14 a.m., Noah woke, coughing. Rowan was there instantly. By morning, Noah's fever had crept back like an enemy testing the gate. The fever didn't break. It climbed. By noon, Noah's lips were pale again, his breaths shallow and uneven. Dr. Desai arrived with the calm urgency of someone who already knew the answer. This isn't just pneumonia anymore, she said. His heart is under too much strain. Rowan stood perfectly still as the words assembled into threat. What are our options? Dr. Desai hesitated. There is an experimental protocol, a combined antibiotic approach paired with early cardiac intervention, where Rowan asked. Johns Hopkins, she replied. But it requires consent for experimental treatment. Rowan turned to Tessa Marlowe. Her face said everything before her mouth moved. You don't have final guardianship yet. The room went cold. So what happens? Rowan asked. Dr. Desai answered softly. We stabilize him and hope. Hope wasn't a strategy. Elsie stood by the window listening. So he needs different medicine, she said. And you can't say yes. Rowan met her gaze. Not yet, her jaw tightened. Then make it yet. The words weren't childish. They were command. That afternoon, Rowan's lawyer, Celeste Rivera, arrived with files thick enough to bruise. We can request an emergency custody hearing, she said, but it won't be uncontested. By who? Rowan asked. The answer arrived an hour later. Dr. Calder-Wren stood in Rowan's living room coat, immaculate voice measured. I was Ivy's colleague, he said, and her friend. Rowan felt the air thin. I'm here because I believe the children's best interests require stability, not sudden reunification. Elsie stepped forward. You're the man who brought books. Wren smiled gently. Yes, you're nice, she said. But you're not our dad. Wren's eyes flicked to Rowan. Biology isn't everything. No, Rowan replied, but presence is. Wren left with a promise to contest custody. That night, Noah's monitor beeped faster. Time began to close its fist. Family court was colder than the street outside. Snow clung to coats. Breath fogged the air. Rowan sat rigid beside Celeste Rivera, eyes fixed ahead, as if willpower alone could move the judge's hand faster. Dr. Wren testified first. He spoke of Ivy's concerns, of Rowan's absences, of years when Rowan had chosen boardrooms over birthdays he never knew existed. Each word cut because it wasn't entirely false. Celeste countered with facts. DNA, medical urgency, the bond forming despite fear and loss. Then, Tessa Marlowe took the stand. These children trust Mr. Kincaid, she said, especially the girl. She evaluates adults the way some people evaluate storms. The judge listened, impassive. Recess was called. Rowan paced the hallway, phone vibrating with updates from Dr. Desai. Noah's oxygen levels dipped, then stabilized. Barely. The courtroom doors opened again. Before the judge spoke, Tessa rose. Your Honor, the child has requested to speak. A murmur rippled. Elsie walked in holding Lucy. She stood straight, unafraid. I want to talk about my dad, she said. The judge nodded. When we were cold, Elsie said he didn't walk away. When Noah was sick, he stayed awake. He fixed Lucy when she was breaking. She looked at Dr. Wren. You're kind, but kindness visits, family stays, silence. The judge leaned forward. Thank you, Elsie. The gavel came down moments later. Temporary emergency guardianship is granted to Rowan Kincaid. Rowan exhaled like a man surfacing. He didn't celebrate. He ran. The signature took less than 3 seconds. Rowan Kincaid stared at his name on the consent form, black ink bleeding into white paper, and understood with terrifying clarity that this single motion held more weight than every contract he had ever signed. This authorizes experimental treatment, Dr. Priya Desai said calmly, and immediate transfer. Rowan nodded. Do it. Elsie stood beside him. Lucy tucked under her arm, eyes fixed on the paper as if memorizing every letter. Noah lay on the gurney behind them, oxygen hissing softly, lashes fluttering with exhaustion. Are we going on another trip? Noah asked weakly. Yes, Rowan said, crouching beside him. A short one. To get your heart some help. Noah smiled faintly. Okay, I trust you. Those 4 words hollowed Rowan's chest. The transfer moved fast. Too fast to think. Alarms, doors, snow-blurred tarmac lights. The helicopter waited like a steel insect under floodlights, rotors already whining. Elsie hesitated at the door. It's loud, she said. I'll be right next to you, Rowan promised. Inside the chopper, winter vanished into vibration and noise. Rowan held Noah's hand through the flight, counting breaths matching his own to the child's shallow rhythm. Elsie pressed close, one hand gripping Rowan's coat, the other wrapped around Lucy. She leaned toward him, voice barely audible over the engine. Mom said sometimes hearts need help remembering how to be strong. Rowan swallowed. She was right. Baltimore rose beneath them in a grid of lights. At Johns Hopkins, a new team took over, efficient, focused, terrifyingly calm. Dr. Mira Song introduced herself with steady eyes and no wasted words. "We'll start the antibiotic protocol immediately," she said. "If his vitals stabilize, surgery follows." "And if they don't?" Rowan asked. Dr. Song met his gaze. "Then we fight harder." Noah was wheeled away. The doors closed. Rowan stood there, hands empty. For the first time in his life, there was nothing left to buy, nothing left to leverage, only waiting. The clock finally started ticking. 6 hours. That was the estimate Dr. Song had given them before Noah disappeared into the operating room, swallowed by sterile light and swinging doors. Rowan sat in the waiting room, elbows on knees, staring at nothing. Elsie sat beside him, back straight, Lucy on her lap. She did not cry. Not once. "You can sleep," Rowan said softly. She shook her head. "If I sleep, I won't hear them come out." Rowan understood. Hours passed in fragments. A nurse brought coffee. Rowan didn't drink it. A surgeon passed by. Not theirs. Elsie asked exactly 3 questions. "How long now? Is that normal? Can hearts feel scared?" "Yes," Rowan answered the last one honestly, "but they can be brave too." At hour 3, Rowan's mind betrayed him. Ivy in their old apartment laughing as she stitched Lucy by the window. Ivy coughing quietly in the bathroom years later, hiding it from him. Ivy writing the letter knowing she wouldn't be there to see this day. He pressed his fists together until his hands ached. At hour 5, Elsie finally leaned against him. "If Noah doesn't wake up," she said calmly, "you still have to stay." Rowan's breath broke. "He's going to wake up." Elsie nodded as if accepting his belief on loan. Then the doors opened. Dr. Song stepped out, mask lowered, eyes tired. Rowan stood so fast, the chair skidded. "The repair was successful," she said. His heart responded beautifully. The world tilted this time toward light. Rowan dropped to his knees, a sound escaping him that was half laugh, half sob. Elsie didn't cry either. She smiled. Just once. Noah woke slowly. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then found Elsie. "Did I win?" he whispered. She laughed, a real laugh this time. "You always do." Rowan stood at the bedside, afraid to touch him, afraid the moment might shatter. Tubes traced Noah's body like lines on a map back from the edge. "Hey, warrior," Rowan said softly. Noah turned his head. "Dad, as my chest feels different." Rowan nodded, stronger. Recovery was not magic. There were days Noah cried in pain, nights Rowan slept in a chair again, mornings Elsie read aloud to keep the room full of sound, but the monitors stayed steady, and winter began to loosen its grip. Weeks later, they returned to New York. Not to the penthouse. Rowan sold it quietly. They moved into a brownstone with a small backyard where snow melted faster and laughter lingered longer. Lucy sat on a shelf, professionally restored, but unmistakably the same patched, imperfect loved. On the first night, Rowan cooked dinner himself. It burned. They laughed anyway. That night, Elsie knocked on his door. "Mom would have liked this place," she said. Rowan nodded. "I think so too." She hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't tentative. It was real. Winter had taken nearly everything from them, but it had also carved space for something new. A family. The first morning felt wrong. Not bad. Just unfamiliar. Winter light filtered through the brownstone's tall windows, pale and quiet, settling over the kitchen table where 3 mismatched mugs waited. Snow still clung to the edges of the backyard fence, but it was thinning now, retreating in patches like a defeated army. Rowan stood barefoot on the cold tile, watching Elsie butter toast with careful precision, while Noah hummed softly, swinging his legs from the chair. The sound was uneven off-key and alive. This, Rowan realized, was the new silence. Not absence. Adjustment. "You're staring," Elsie said without looking up. "Sorry," Rowan replied. "I'm learning." She accepted that, sliding Noah's plate toward him. "Eat slow." Dr. Song said, "No rushing." Noah nodded solemnly. "My heart gets grumpy if I rush." Rowan smiled despite the tightness in his chest. "We don't want a grumpy heart." The school bus arrived at exactly 8:12. Elsie had memorized the schedule by the second. She stood at the door with her backpack on Lucy tucked inside, as if the doll were a talisman against bad outcomes. She didn't hug Rowan. Not yet. "I'll be back," she said. "Don't change anything." Rowan held the door. "I won't." After the bus pulled away, the house felt too big again. Noah rested on the couch, blanket pulled to his chin, eyes drooping from medication. Rowan worked at the dining table, laptop open, but the numbers refused to behave. Every email felt trivial. Every meeting request unnecessary. At noon, Tessa Marlowe arrived for her weekly visit. She didn't bring a clipboard this time. "You're settling," she observed, watching Noah color at the table. "We're trying," Rowan said. She studied him for a long moment. Trying isn't nothing. Later that night, Noah woke screaming. Rowan was there instantly, heart-racing mind already spiraling toward worst-case scenarios. But it wasn't pain. It was memory. "They took Els," Noah sobbed, clinging to Rowan's shirt. "They took her to another house." Rowan held him until the shaking passed. Elsie stood in the doorway watching. "I didn't know he still remembered that," Rowan said quietly once Noah slept again. "He remembers everything," Elsie replied. "He just doesn't talk about it." She hesitated, then spoke again. "You don't yell." Rowan frowned. "Is that a problem?" "No," she said quickly. "Just different." Different was the hardest part. Days passed. Therapy appointments. Medication schedules taped to the fridge. Rowan learned how to cook food that wasn't delivered in boxes. He learned that Elsie preferred the light on in the hallway at night. That Noah needed 3 stories, not 2. And still, the cracks showed. One evening, Rowan came home late, only 40 minutes, a meeting that ran long. Elsie didn't speak during dinner. At bedtime, she placed Lucy on the shelf with more force than necessary. "You said you wouldn't disappear," she said flatly. Rowan knelt. "I was wrong. I should have called." Silence stretched. Then she nodded once. "Next time call." It wasn't forgiveness. It was structure. That weekend, they went to the park. Noah walked carefully, breath steady, eyes bright. Elsie trailed behind Rowan, watching people exit dogs, always counting. A man jogged past, laughing into his phone. Elsie flinched. Rowan noticed. That night, after Noah slept, Elsie sat at the kitchen table, homework spread before her. "Do you miss Mom?" she asked suddenly. Rowan didn't lie. "Every day." She nodded. "Me too." She looked at Lucy on the shelf. "But I think she'd like this." Rowan followed her gaze. The house wasn't perfect, but it was breathing. Outside, winter finally began to loosen its hold. And Rowan understood something vital. Saving Noah's heart had been the beginning. Winning Elsie's trust, that would take time. The house was quiet in a way Rowan had never known before. Not the hollow silence of his penthouse. Not the echo of absence that had followed Ivy's death. This was a living quiet. The kind that listened back. Snow fell softly outside the brownstone windows, no longer violent, no longer sharp. It landed, rested, and melted like winter finally learning how to leave. Rowan sat alone in his study, the door closed, a single lamp casting warm light across the desk. In front of him lay the letter. Ivy's letter. The one he had only read in fragments. The one he had been afraid to finish. He had survived hostile takeovers, public scandals, markets collapsing overnight. He had faced surgeons and judges and the possibility of burying his own child. But this terrified him. Because once he finished reading, there would be no more messages from her. No more hidden guidance. No more illusions that she might somehow still be speaking. He unfolded the pale blue paper, carefully smoothing the creases with reverent fingers. Her handwriting flowed across the page, graceful and familiar, every curve, a ghost of the woman he had loved too late. Rowan. If you're reading this entire letter, it means you stayed. He closed his eyes. I always hoped you would. He inhaled slowly and continued. I need to tell you the truth, not the softened version I carried in my heart, but the honest one. Because love that survives lies isn't love. It's fear. When I realized I was pregnant, I was terrified, not of motherhood, but of losing myself in the shadow of your ambition. I tried to tell you. I really did. But every time I reached for you, you were already gone. Rowan's jaw tightened. When the divorce papers arrived, something inside me broke cleanly. Not because you wanted to leave, but because you never came to say it in person. He swallowed hard. So I chose silence, at first out of pride, then out of protection, and later, out of habit. That was my failure. The word failure burned. I kept our children from you. I told myself I was keeping them safe from disappointment, from abandonment, from a father who might leave again. But the truth is, I was also protecting myself from hoping you had changed. Rowan lowered the letter, breath shaking. He had changed. Too late. He forced himself to continue. Elsie grew up too fast. She watches doors the way other children watch cartoons. She counts exits. She memorizes patterns. Please be patient with her. Safety is the language she learned when love was uncertain. His chest ached. Noah is braver than he knows. His heart, yes, that heart has always been fragile, but his spirit never was. He will forgive you easily. That is both his gift and his danger. Rowan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, unashamed. They will test you. They should. Do not demand their trust. Earn it. The lamp flickered slightly, as if acknowledging the weight of her words. I told them stories about a prince because I needed them to believe that someone powerful could still be kind. That someone lost could still find his way home. I did not tell them the prince was you, because I needed you to choose them without the costume. Rowan exhaled a broken sound. She had known him too well. If fate brought Lucy back to you, then fate is kinder than I expected. He glanced at the shelf across the room. Lucy sat there, professionally restored now, but still visibly patched. The scars remained, exactly as Elsie had wanted. Rowan, if you are holding this letter, then you are already doing what I hoped you would, staying when it hurts. That is all I ever wanted for our children. He reached the final lines. Love them with presence, not perfection. Forgive yourself. That part is essential. And when you doubt whether you are enough, remember this: I believed in you long before you learned how to believe in yourself. Forever, Ivy. The letter slid from Rowan's hands. He sat there for a long time, unmoving, as if the room itself were holding him together. Forgive yourself. He had punished himself for years, through work, through distance, through emotional austerity, believing that guilt was a form of accountability. Ivy had known better. Forgiveness was not escape. It was responsibility without self-destruction. A soft knock came at the door. Dad Elsie's voice. Rowan cleared his throat. Come in. She stepped inside, pajama sleeves too long, Lucy tucked under one arm. Her eyes flicked to the letter on the desk. You read it all, she said. Yes. She nodded, accepting that like a fact. What did it say, she asked. Rowan considered the question carefully. It said your mom loved you more than anything, he replied, and that she trusted me with the rest. Elsie studied his face, searching for cracks. She always trusted people carefully, she said. I know, Rowan replied. I'm honored she trusted me at all. Elsie climbed onto the chair across from him, curling her legs beneath her. She didn't hate you, she said quietly, even when she was sad. Rowan's voice broke. I know. Silence settled, not heavy but shared. After a moment, Elsie spoke again. Are you going to leave? Rowan shook his head. No. Even when you mess up, yes. Even when I don't talk to you, yes. Even when Noah gets sick again and everything gets scary. Rowan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. Especially then. She nodded once, satisfied. Okay, she said. Then Mom was right. Rowan felt something unclench inside him. Later that week, they went to the shelter. Noah walked slowly, holding Rowan's hand, eyes bright with curiosity. Elsie followed, watchful as always. A dog pressed its nose against the cage bars. Shaggy, uneven. One ear bent slightly forward like it had once made a bad decision. He looks lost, Noah said. The volunteer smiled. He was found wandering in the snow. Elsie crouched. The dog licked her fingers. He's not broken, she said. Just tired. Rowan knew then. They named him Prince. That night, Rowan signed the papers. Not the adoption yet, but the intention, the choice. The promise made legal. As winter thinned into memory, Rowan understood something Ivy had tried to teach him from the beginning. Love didn't need grand gestures. It needed continuity. And for the first time in his life, Rowan Kincaid wasn't afraid of staying. The courthouse smelled like old paper and winter coats. Outside, the sidewalks were wet with melting snow, slush, reflecting the gray sky and broken mirrors. Inside, the heat was too dry, as if the building had spent decades trying to erase the cold without ever succeeding. Rowan Kincaid stood at the security gate with both children beside him. Noah's hand was in his small and warm. Elsie held Lucy under her arm, not like a toy, like proof. Prince waited outside with Jenna, who had insisted on coming, eyes sharp, lips pressed tight in the way she wore worry like armor. Rowan adjusted Noah's scarf, then turned to Elsie. You okay? He asked softly. Elsie nodded once. The gesture was restrained, but her fingers tightened around Lucy's dress. Her gaze moved quickly, doorways, people, exits, until it settled back on Rowan. Will the judge take us away? Noah asked. Rowan crouched so they were eye level. No, he promised. Not today, not ever. Elsie's eyes narrowed. Promises are expensive. Rowan didn't flinch. Then I'll pay in time. That made something flicker across her face, almost a smile gone before it could fully form. They entered the courtroom. It was smaller than Rowan expected. Less dramatic. No grand columns, no movie music. Just wood fluorescent light, and a woman behind a bench who had seen too many families break in the same room. Judge Halston looked over her glasses. Mr. Kincaid, she said, we meet again. Rowan's throat tightened. He remembered the first hearing, how cold his hands had been, how Noah's oxygen numbers had felt like a countdown, how Elsie had walked in with Lucy and turned a court into a confession. Yes, Your Honor, Rowan replied. Tessa Marlowe stood at the side, file in hand. No clipboard now, just a folder that looked thinner than it once had, like the case itself had begun to let go. We're here for finalization, Tessa said. Judge Halston nodded. I've reviewed the reports, home visits, therapy notes, medical updates, school updates, all consistent. Rowan heard the words, but didn't feel steady yet. Not until it was done. Not until the law said what his heart had already sworn. The judge looked down at Noah. And how is your heart today, young man? Noah sat up straighter, proud. It's not grumpy anymore. A ripple of restrained laughter moved through the room. Judge Halston's mouth softened. That's good to hear. She turned to Elsie. And you? Elsie's gaze lifted, direct and calm. I'm fine. Fine, the judge repeated gently, like she had heard that word used as a shield 1,000 times. Your teacher says you've started raising your hand in class. Elsie blinked, surprised. Rowan felt a quiet warmth bloom in his chest, a small victory that didn't need applause. Judge Halston leaned forward slightly. "Elsie," she said, "do you understand what today means?" Elsie hugged Lucy a little tighter. "It means he's officially our dad. And how do you feel about that?" The courtroom held its breath. Elsie's eyes moved to Rowan, not searching for what to say, searching for whether it was still safe to tell the truth. She spoke quietly, but every word landed like a bell. "I feel safer." Rowan's vision blurred. Judge Halston nodded satisfied and looked at Rowan again. "Mr. Kincaid," she said, "parenthood is not a rescue mission. It is a daily choice." "You understand that?" "Yes," Rowan answered. "I used to believe love was something you proved with grand gestures. I was wrong. Love is time. It's showing up. It's staying, especially when it's inconvenient." The judge's eyes sharpened, reading him. "And your work?" Rowan didn't hesitate. "I stepped down as sole CEO. My firm has co-leadership now. My schedule is built around them, not the other way around." Tessa's gaze flicked to him, approval quiet and earned. Judge Halston tapped a pen once against the bench. "Very well," she said. "Then let's finalize what you've been proving." She lifted the document. "The adoption of Madison Elsie Hart and Noah Hart by Rowan Kincaid is hereby approved and finalized." For a second, sound disappeared. Rowan couldn't breathe. Then Noah whispered, "We did it." Elsie didn't cry. She exhaled, like someone setting down a weight she'd carried too long. Rowan turned his face slightly away, but tears slid anyway. He didn't wipe them. He let them exist. He let them mean something. The judge signed, the clerk stamped. The gavel didn't slam dramatically, it just landed. A quiet ending to a loud chapter. Outside the courtroom, Jenna was waiting. Prince strained against the leash tail, wagging so hard his whole body shook. Noah laughed and crouched to pet him. "Prince, we're official." Prince licked his face in agreement. Elsie stood back, Lucy under her arm, watching Rowan. Rowan held out his hand, not demanding, offering. Elsie stared at it as if it were a bridge over a river she'd been afraid to cross. Then she placed her hand in his. It wasn't tentative anymore. It stayed. On the courthouse steps, winter air hit them like a reminder. The sky was pale, the city still damp with melting snow, but sunlight slipped through clouds in thin golden strips, like the world was finally willing to be gentle. They walked home, not to the penthouse full of shine and loneliness, to the brownstone with muddy footprints by the door, to the fridge covered in Noah's drawings and Elsie's schedules, to Lucy on the shelf beside a framed photo of Ivy smiling soft-eyed as if she had always known this would happen. That night, Rowan cooked dinner again. It didn't burn this time. Noah insisted on saying grace the way Ivy had taught him, stumbling over words, but saying the important part clearly, "Thank you for bringing us home." Elsie sat quiet, then reached for Rowan's hand across the table. Rowan's breath caught. "You okay?" he whispered. Elsie nodded. Then, like it was the simplest thing in the world, she said, "Dad, can we keep her here?" She lifted Lucy slightly. Rowan swallowed. "Always," Elsie's voice softened. "Mom would like that." Rowan looked toward Ivy's photo, then to the two children beside him, and felt something settle deep in his bones, something stronger than grief. Not forgetting, not replacing, just continuing. Later, when the children were asleep and Prince had curled like a warm comma at the foot of the stairs, Rowan stepped into the backyard. The last patches of snow melted under the porch light. Water dripped from the fence. The air smelled like wet earth and beginnings. Rowan pulled Ivy's letter from the drawer, reread the final line, and smiled through the ache. Love finds its way home. He looked up at the windows where two small silhouettes had once been afraid of darkness and now slept in rooms that were theirs. Home wasn't marble. Home was not being alone. Home was a promise that stayed. And in the soft, fading winter night, Rowan Kincaid finally understood he hadn't rescued them. They had rescued him. Did this story move your soul? Share your feelings in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Click the end screen to watch another heartfelt video. See you in the next story.